Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Michael Burns. Michael is located out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and is a real estate investor, broker, and also a lender. Michael is also the host of his own podcast, Freedom Lifestyle Experience. Michael is an example, the standard, the epitome of his lifestyle brand, and promotes and becoming the best version of yourself and building relationships, becoming a key factor in anyone's success. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Michael. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
What's going on, Dwight? Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the show and finally be here. I know we started talking about it in Mexico a couple months ago, and here we are.
Yeah, it's Mexico is a great event for those my listeners that are on all the time. I talk about 365 all the time, and they will know about our events. And always a great byproduct of those events is meeting fantastic people like you. I hadn't even left the event, and I knew I wanted you on the podcast. Quite a few of the people at the event are going to be on my show. A couple have already been on. It's just, yeah, like you said, though, just before we started recording, it's great to have all that knowledge and that education where we sit down and we heard great people like you, like the amount of notes I took from your talk. And you're a great speaker, by the way. I never told you that. So I got lots of great notes. I even recorded the audio of it, listened to part of it yesterday as well. But that knowledge and everything's great. But what did you say? The networking part, the people, the relationship building is the most important thing. And I've been blessed and highly favored to now call you a new friend, right? And somebody that I can reach out to and shoot the shit with and just be real and honest and vulnerable and not worry about being judged, right? And that's what events like that are great for, in my opinion. So one of the things I agree. Yeah. So, add your takeaway. You've probably been to a lot of events. Like I've been close to 300 events in the last 30 years of my life as a serial entrepreneur. What are most events like? You have 1,000 people, 500 people, and they all go in like high school, little cliques all over the place, and then people don't really visit or the speakers leave. Tell my listeners what your experience was.
Well, I think I'm the same way. I spend a tremendous invest, not spend. I invest a lot of time and money into my self-development and putting myself in environments and rooms like that. But I think you kind of have two models. You've got the seminar model, which is what you're talking about, 500 people, 1,000, couple thousand people, just bang, 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 speakers all day, going all day long. You have a lunch break and it's just intense and lots of heavy note taking. And maybe you're networking with who you're sitting next to. But then you have masterminds, which are going to be smaller groups, more intimate. And the difference I find between the two is masterminds are really a great environment to build relationships. And usually the way that they're set up is there's going to be a lot more time for networking and relationship building. Kind of like when we were at Tony's event in Mexico, we're going out and doing the ruins and we're swimming and in the cenotes and doing dinners together and just really getting that FaceTime in. So for me, when I'm at these events or masterminds, there's kind of two parts to it. There's the information and the content, which is amazing, but then there's also the relationship piece. And for me, I probably get more value out of the relationships long-term because that's who, become your new friends, your new circle of influence. That's who you're calling when you're having a hard time, or you need a referral for something, you do business together, you make money together, investments, whatever it might be. So I think that's kind of the difference of the two. I really prefer more of a mastermind situation because it's just smaller, it's more intimate. You get to know everyone there. And I think people who are attracted to that kind of scenario and they want to commit to signing up to a mastermind group for a year, or like Tony's event, they continue to show up to each one. That shows that those people are also interested in the relationship piece as well, in the community there. And I think that's where the magic happens.
Oh, what an amazing breakdown. I'm glad I asked you it, because so many people are confused between the differences. And you're right. Like, I've been to 3 of the events. One of them I couldn't go to. I couldn't get across the border during the pandemic. I couldn't fly, I couldn't drive. It was closed down. So I couldn't go to one of the, because he's had 4 now. That was the 4th event. I've been to 3 of them. But you're right. The connections and relationships I've built have been phenomenal. But it all started from Arte going to an event and sitting at a table where Lisa and Tony were in the first event, which is April of 2019, and not really knowing who they are, just said hi. And then fast forward to the fall of 2019, listening to Tony speak, and I went and sought him out, and fast forward, I get part of the 365 Society. He directs me to people that got me focused on doing podcasting. He focused on getting my book done with Mike. Mike was at the first event, Mike Follett. And, just stuff like that, just my branding to getting access to David Breyer. Like, people don't realize a spider is one spider, and then it goes out and creates a web that goes all over the place. And that was what Arte was for me. And one of the streams to that was Tony, and then Tony to a bunch more people. So relationships are so key for us to be successful in any aspect of our life. One of the things I struggled with, I don't know if you ever have, as I always, I wanted to do it on my own. I'll figure it out, right? I don't need anybody. I've forgotten more than that person knows. I had that attitude back in my 30s, and, it didn't serve me. I thought it did, but it didn't. And I would be so much farther in my life had I just understood that relationships were the key factor, and that person's knowledge can help fill in the gaps where I'm lacking, whether I listen to them, take notes, or they actually support me. So I appreciate your response and answer, and I look forward to seeing you again at another event.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add to that too, that I think is important when you're talking about the relationships and the network, they say it's not about the 40 people that you're meeting in the room. It's about those 40 people's entire network that you don't know. You're now getting access to that. So you need a referral for whatever it might be. You have 40 new contacts. Well, really, you have their entire extended reach as well. You know what I mean? You have the entire network of 40 new people. And that's really powerful, especially in the world of business, when, it's really, a lot of times it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And that's how shit gets done. That's how deals happen. That's just, the purpose of really why I spend the time and effort that I do, doing stuff like that.
Well, and you bring up a valid point. I remember on one of the, because I belonged to one of Tony's mastermind groups in my second year, and I said that, it's not what you know and who you know, blah, blah, blah. And he said to me, he says, I totally agree. But the key factor to that even functioning is the person has to be willing. They have to be wanting to get support and help. So back to what you said about 40 people getting together, because that's what our group was 30, 40 people at this last event. Everybody that's flying there, spending that money, investing that money, has a purpose of wanting to build relationships and connect and grow and be with people that are like-minded and have the same synergy. And I like, though, how you added, it's not just the fact that I've become friends with you now. If I need support, so many other people that I might never, ever meet, but someday I might need that person. And you're going to be the dude, you're going to be the man that's going to say, hey, Dwight, I know somebody that I can connect you to. And that's what happened with me yesterday. Somebody I met at another event, not a 365. I go to speakers, authors, and coaches. I'm friends with one of Tony's friends he's a friend of mine now too. And I was having problems. My Instagram account was closed down. Been very frustrating, right? 12 years I've had that account, closed it down, trying to get Instagram to reinstate it. It had nothing to do with me posting. They claim that I'm not who I am. Well, I didn't know what to do. So when I posted saying, here's my new Instagram account, I can't get back into my old one. I had another buddy that I met as he was a speaker at another event. He's been on my podcast. We talk quite often. He lives in California. He's a former a professional snowboarder, just super nice guy. He says, hey, I got a contact at Facebook. Let me connect you. Right. There you go. But I would have never thought to reach out to him, but he's seen my social media posts and reached out to me and said, hey, dude. And that's, he talks like the California guy, right? He's, it's just awesome. And he says, let me connect you. Does a group text. Girl's going to help me out. It's going to cost me $100 versus the $1,000 Tony just spent to have his recovered about a month ago.
Yeah.
Right. Bottom line, it's like you said, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So I appreciate that, but we could keep on going. I love talking to you, brother. But one of the things that I focus on my podcast, and I know everybody asks, what's your background? What's your backstory? What's this? What's that? To me, the origin from the earliest moments of Michael, from when little wee Michael can remember all the way up to where you are now, are so key to who you've become. And even if it hasn't, sometimes I'll have conversation with somebody about their origin. It'll stir up things that they've never shared before. And the more we're vulnerable, the more the listeners are going to know, like, and trust you, so that if they need knowledge or they want to hire somebody, poof, there they go. They can get a hold of Michael, because we've already set the stage for the fact that you're the real freaking deal. Does it make sense? So can you do me a favor and share your earliest recollections that you're willing to share? You don't have to, right up to where you are today, about your origin, brother.
Okay, cool. So I'll just kind of give you an overview. So I was born in Bakersfield, California, and then the town that I grew up in was so small, it didn't have a hospital big enough to like be born in. So Tehachapi, California is where I was raised. It's like the northern part of Southern California, so an hour and a half north of LA, maybe an hour and a half inland from the coast. And my parents owned a nursery and a garden center, like landscape company. So small town, small family owned business. The business ran our life. Like, we did not run the business ran our life. I was 15 years old before I went on my first vacation that was longer than, a 2 or 3 day trip to the mountains or the beach. And it was the greatest gift I could have got. So my dad was at the nursery, all day, every day, 7 days a week. My mom was running us around the sports, taking care of the house, doing the books, helping dad out with the business. And it was just a fucking fast-paced deal. And it was an awesome environment for me to grow up in, because the nursery business it's physical work, right? It's manual labor. So you learn work ethic, but also I'm growing up in this atmosphere and environment where I'm hearing about business. I'm understanding credit is important. I'm seeing my dad being a leader in the community. He had that business for 25 years in this small town. So we'd go to the bank, and if there was a line, it was like, oh, Mr. Burns over here, like, didn't wait in line. And I saw my dad just be extremely connected. If he had to go to the doctor, he'd get an IV on his doctor's front porch type of shit, like, just very well connected. And I started to see the value of relationships. And what a big deal that was. But also my dad would tell me, all you have is your name and your word, your name and your word, your name and your word. And you just burnt that into my head, your name and your word. So integrity is a big deal. Relationships are a big deal. I'm learning about hard work. I'm learning about finances and credit and all of the stuff. So I grew up there. My parents had that business, and then they sold it when I was like a sophomore in high school. My dad took that money and he bought a bunch of lots, like building lots. And then he partnered over the next 5 years, he partnered with a guy that I had known since I was a little kid, because I was always around the nursery, who was a general contractor and a landscape contractor. And they built, I don't know, probably 20 spec homes over the course of 4 years, maybe. So I watched him make a ton of money in real estate. That was like, that was like 2000, maybe 2003 to 2008. So right when 2008 was happening, they sold their last spec home. So that's when real estate, which is what I do now, kind of got on my radar. So I graduate high school. I moved to Bakersfield, which was like 45 minutes away, because again, Tehachapi is a small town. There's not a school there or anything. I go to junior college for a semester, and I was like, fuck this. This is not my jam. This ain't for me. So to this day, my dad still jokes with me, and he's like, son, I'll never forget when you called me and you said, Dad, I just want to make as much money as I can, as fast as I can, and I don't give a fuck what I do. So I quit junior college. I moved to Oregon because my parents had bought land up there and they were going to build, pretty much their forever house up in Oregon. So I moved up to Oregon and I started working I had two jobs. I started working at the Rogue Regency Inn as like I was like a bank on the banquet staff. So we would do like I would show up in the mornings at like 5 a.m. and I would do the Rotary Club. And then there were like two other clubs. So it was like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There were these clubs that had their morning breakfast meeting. So I would show up early and I would facilitate the whole breakfast meeting, blah, 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 tear down and then set up for the next event later that day. And it's funny now because I spend all this time and effort going to seminars and shit. And I remember doing banquet serving back then. And there was always all sorts of seminars and sales things and real estate things and all these different seminars and shit going on. And it wasn't even on my radar back then. Otherwise, I probably would have been in the back of the room, like listening. It's like I spent hundreds of thousands to be in the environment that I was in for free, for probably a year there and just didn't know it. So anyways, I was doing the banquet serving thing. And then I thought I wanted to open a nursery of my own in Oregon. So I started working at a garden center there locally. And I was working both jobs. Did that for about a year. And then I got the opportunity to go up to what's called Monrovia Nursery, which would be like the Microsoft in the computer world. Monrovia is like the Microsoft of the plant business on the wholesale side. So they have a 1,000-acre nursery in Oregon, another huge one in California, Ohio, and then Georgia. So I went up there just to tour the nursery and kind of check out the thing. I have the mindset that I'm going to start my own garden center. So my grandpa was like a sales legend at Monrovia for a long time, like, and kind of like a big deal around there. So when I went to tour the nursery, I checked in and I was like, oh, I'm Michael Burns. I just want to get a tour. And they were like, Burns, like James Burns or Jim Burns. And I was like, yeah, that was my grandpa. And the reception was like, oh my God, like Jim Burns' grandson's here. So I got like all this special treatment and I had no idea like what I was in for. So anyways, I toured the nursery. It was cool. And then when I came back, the same lady was like, hey, our inside sales manager, Jerry Gross, would like to meet you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I went into Jerry's office and sat down and I'm just getting to know him. And I felt like I was in a full blown interview, like on the hot seat. Like he was just fucking hitting me with all these questions. And all of a sudden, then he asked me, have you ever considered like getting into the wholesale side of the business, like semi soft putting out like would you consider working here type of thing. And I was like 19 years old, no horticulture degree, no nothing. And then their whole inside sales team's like the next youngest person was probably early 30s, mid 30s. So it was just an intimidating thing for me. So I went home back down to Southern Oregon and I ended up getting in a blowout with the owner's daughter of the nursery I was working at. And I was like, fuck you. Like, I'm not dealing with your shit. Like when your dad comes back, we can all sit down, have a meeting, but I'm not fucking dealing with your bullshit. Like, and I left and I went home and Jerry had given me the card because I told him when I was there, I was like, I just don't feel like I'm ready for all of this. Let me learn my plants a little bit better. Didn't feel like I was ready for it. And I was like, fuck it. I was mad. So I called him up. I was like, hey, Jerry, I thought about it. I'd like to maybe consider taking you up on your offer and coming and interviewing. And so I was up there like 2 days later just because I got pissed off at my current job. So I went up, did the interview, left. They called me a couple hours later, maybe not even a couple hours, an hour later, and offered me a job position with them. So it was like, I got paid, I think it was $15 an hour or something like that, plus commission. So I said yes. And then I moved up north. It was about 4 hours north from where I was living. So I moved up north and I started doing the inside sales thing. And I had zero sales experience, none of that. And I just really excelled on the phone. I ended up setting a company sales record for them. I sold like $2.2 million my first full year on the phone. And then also during that time, I had a guy named Ken Dykes who was like he was literally like my mentor there. Like he was the guy that kind of trained me and showed me the ropes and stuff. And one day, so when I was probably halfway through that first year and I was just dominating, kicking ass, like having $400,000 months and stuff. One day I came in and there was like a computer paper and it said $2 million on it. And it was on the outside of my cubicle. And I walked in and I was like, what is this? And he's like, you're going to sell 2 million this year. Like, I believe in you. You can do it. And that's such a major, major, major thing for me in my life, because that was essentially a vision board. And that was like setting a goal, you know, and that was new to me. That had never happened for me in my life before. So I have this $2 million thing that I'd walk in every day and I would see it. Every time I go to the bathroom or the printer or anything, I see this $2 million thing on the outside of my deal. And I ended up doing 2.2 million in sales that year. And then also Ken gave me a book called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, which was written by W. Clement Stone. And he studied under Napoleon Hill. So it was like a spinoff of Think and Grow Rich. So there are a couple massive things happen for me in my life in this time. I have this $2 million thing I'm seeing every day. And now I'm reading my first self-development book, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And then I hit 2.2 million and exceeded this goal, set a company sales record and all of this stuff. So like that was extremely eye-opening and mind-opening to me, because I'm like, oh, wow, like vision board works, like reading a self-development book and doing this shit works, like changing the way you think, you know, learning about law of attraction. And then I got The Secret and I started listening to The Secret. And that's really kind of what started fueling my self-development and then my sales skills and stuff. So I was at that company for like 2 years, and then a territory opened up that was I would have lived in Spokane, Washington. So the territory would have been Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho, like the Coeur d'Alene area, and then Central British Columbia and parts of Alberta. So I applied for the territory, and it was me and another dude that applied for it. The other guy who applied for it had been with the company like 5 years. I sold literally double the amount that he did. And he was probably, I don't know, 38 or 40 years old at that point, and he was from Spokane. So they ended up giving him the territory, and I was fucking pissed, because I'm like, I sell circles around this guy. Like, what are we doing? And when I was that year, I made like 58,000 and some change, selling 2.2 million worth of stuff, because I had like an hourly plus like we had a commission structure. So anyways, going into this territory, if you're an outside rep, it's 10% commission, and that territory did about 1.8 million in volume. So in my mind, I just got passed on $180,000 job opportunity, and now I'm staying here, you know, basically tapped out where I'm at. So I ended up quitting and I left, and I went and talked to this guy named Leo Gentry, who my dad had a 20-year relationship with, and he had a major big nursery in Oregon as well. So he gave me, I started with 0 customers, but he gave me exclusive rights to sell his product in British Columbia and Alberta up in Canada. That's when we were talking. That's how I know Western Canada, because I've driven off that place. And then I had like 8 states in the Western US. So I moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, where I'm at now, and I hit the road. I'd spend about enough days to be 6 months on the calendar, traveling, paying my own way for everything, commission only. 10% commission, and all I had was an opportunity and a bunch of hustle and drive. So I would go on like 2-week road trips. I'd sleep in my car because I had to pay my own way. I negotiated like a $3,000 a month draw against future commissions. So I'm leaving being the top dog, big boss, you know, making 60 grand a year, thinking I'm the fucking shit. And then I go out, and this is in 2008. I go out on my own. And anyway, so that was hard, man. I cold called literally thousands of nurseries. I would just show up unannounced, cold call, ask for the owner or the manager, and I just ask them if I could get 5 minutes. I looked like I was 16 at the time. And so I was like 20, 22, 23 when I started doing this. And I just cold called nurseries and built that up for 4 years in the middle of 2008. So like everyone's business was off 50%. The nursery supply, like it's a very much a relationship driven thing. So, you know, as an environment where I'm going in with one of the most expensive products, it's a very relationship driven business. Like guys in the wholesale nursery business, they've worked with their suppliers for 20 years, 30 years. So I'm trying, and then they're buying half of what they were in the previous year. So it's just a really tough environment. And I was out there cold calling. So I built that up to about $500,000 in sales over 4 years. And then, my brother hit me up and was like, hey, are you going to be home this weekend? There's a free house flipping workshop. Do you want to go to it? And I said, yeah, I'll be home. Let's do it. So I went to the house flipping workshop with my brother. We ended up paying for like a $1,500 course. And that started my real estate journey. So it took us and I want everyone to listen to what I'm about to tell you. It took us a year and 94 offers. Like we looked at 94 properties, ran numbers, comps, analyzed them, and submitted offers on 94 properties over the course of a year before we got our first deal. Got our first deal, made 24,000 on that first flip. I said, fucking A, real estate's where it's at. So I walked away from what I've been doing, like just told the guy, hey, thanks for the opportunity, but I'm going full force with this real estate thing. So we closed on our first flip, and maybe halfway through the first flip, we bought our second flip. We lost 50,000 on the second flip, and then we lost 12,000 on the third flip. We broke even on the fourth flip and made like 10 grand on the fifth flip. And that all took about 18 months right there. So that was like really, really challenging. Getting into real estate for me did not go smooth or easy. But we had a couple of like wholesale deals come up, and we made 50 grand on 3 different quick wholesale deals. If you don't know what a wholesale is, it's basically where I say, hey, Dwight, I'm going to buy your house from you for 200,000, and we have a contract. And then I sell that contract to another investor for say 220. So that investor buys your house from you, and then I make a spread in the middle. It's called a wholesale deal. So me and my brother got lucky, and we had 3 wholesale deals that we made 50 grand on between the 3 of them. And that's kind of what got us through all those losses in that first 18 months. Fast forward to today, I own a real estate brokerage, mortgage company. We flip about 40 homes a year. I got a 58 unit rental portfolio. We lend hard money. And now I'm starting to take my real estate money and invest into businesses just as an equity partner. And that's kind of the overview of my story and where we're at.
Wow, man. You and I have so much in common, and we won't get into, because otherwise I might as well be on, you interviewing me, because our similarities and commonalities are so in tune. It's unbelievable. I grew up with a father, just so very successful entrepreneur, married to the business. The business controlled him. He was a top dealer in Canada for many, many years, farm implement dealer. We were lucky if we got dragged out to the local lake in a trailer and dumped off for 2 weeks, and we would see him late at night if we were lucky, right? And it controlled him. Very, very successful with it. But what I didn't know, the biggest education piece I got from him is when I just turned 16, pulled me into his office and realized like how wealthy he was. I thought we were poor because my dad, penny pincher, have you seen him?
I remember you telling me.
You could have a little tin cup and shake it and go get change in the corner. That's how, right? Cheap Walmart runners, whatever the case may be. He did not believe in owning new, always bought used vehicles. I don't think he probably was in his 70s until he bought a first new vehicle. He's just not that type of guy. But anyway, my dad pulled me in the office. I might have told you that story, but my listeners, I don't think I've talked about this. And he sat me down. And he said, sit there. Picked up the phone, and this wasn't even a touch tone phone yet. It was still a rotary dial, right? If you even know what a rotary phone is.
Oh yeah.
And he dialed the rotary number, and he called a broker out east in Ontario because they didn't have them in Alberta. And I grew up in a small community of at that time 10,000 people. I grew up in a farming community, right? We did have some amenities and stuff, but he proceeded to buy what's called a strip bond, and $1 million strip bond. And I'm just like, all right, jaws dropped to the floor. And I'm just like, but my dad, just like you, and we won't get into all the details of it. You and I can have a conversation outside of this or whatever the case may be, but I learned a lot from my dad. And one of the things you mentioned was relationship building. My dad was a connector. He was a relationship person. Somebody would come in and say, oh, he was kind of like a barber or a hairstylist or, a bartender, and he'd be listening to all this information and he basically connect them to people. Oh yeah, I know somebody that can help you out. My dad wasn't the type of person that was fluff. He'd pick up the freaking phone and start, rotary dialing and, hey, I got somebody here. You need to talk to them. They need your help. He'd hand the phone to the farmer, right? Or whoever it was. Or he'd have salespeople come in and he'd sit them down and tell them that he was going to, he'd listen to them. He'd listen to their spiel, and then he'd correct them how they should have done it. Right. He'd try to help them increase their likability, their no like and trust factor. And I learned so much from him. But as a young kid, I was 16, I worked from him from the time I was about 12. I was out back pushing brooms and handing tools to the heavy duty mechanics and stuff. I didn't realize the value of it until I got into my 20s and started my own business. And it is so important for people to understand, you know, our origin, our family teaches us a lot. It's just tough because I have young listeners that are 18, 19 years old. And some of my young listeners realize that your parents or people that are around you are your first mentors. Are they always good mentors? Not necessarily, but you need to look for the little tidbits of knowledge that you can get to either do, copy, or run away from. All right. Not everything you're going to get mentored on is a good thing, but it might be what you shouldn't do in life. And that could be your friends, it could be your uncles, aunts, it can be your parents, right? So I appreciate what you shared. That was, yeah, there's so many more things we could talk about. I learned so much from my dad, and I took many different things and tried different businesses. And, I had situations like that. I think that's amazing though, that, I wrote it down here. You took 94 offers before your first one. Like that's, but if that stuff didn't happen, you wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't be, if you wouldn't have gone through the trials and tribulations of working for the one nursery to going to another circumstance where you're sleeping in your car to that weekend with your brother. Everything happened. People sit back and complain and bitch instead of looking at stuff. And even if it's something that failed, what was the value in it? And you kept on keeping on, brother. Like you're a good example of somebody that is tenacious. I love it.
Well, it's building blocks too, like everything, stepping stones. So whether they're wins or losses, you learn from it. And I think you learn more from the losses than you do the wins. But like having the inside sales experience on the phone helped me with sales experience and comfortable talking with people. And then, you're doing that face-to-face cold calling, and like everything's just like building block in a process. But where you're talking about earlier, and you and I talked about this a lot when we were in Mexico, but our environment is everything. So the reason you go to masterminds and different shit like that is because you're trying to put yourself in a good environment. But, the environment that we grew up in, and the information and the energy and the attitude and the thought processes and all of the mindset and all of the stuff that we grow up in around our parents or whatever our growing up environment looks like, that's where all of our foundational training and programming happens. So, I'm lucky because I grew up in a small business owned atmosphere, but like the environment that you grow up in is going to be the programming that you have. So, it's really important to look at the stuff that's good and positive, but like you said too, there's also the flip side and the bad of that. So like for me, I'm never going to I work a tremendous amount, but one of the biggest things I learned is we missed out on family reunions, we missed out on vacations, we missed out on so much shit because that fucking business ran our life and it cheated us out of a lot of quality time together. So my companies are lifestyle lending, lifestyle realty, Freedom Lifestyle Experiences, my podcast. So my whole message is around lifestyle, and money is just only one of those pillars.
It's a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah. But as like when you become aware of the program and the environment that you were raised upon, and you realize a lot of those ideas aren't even yours, it's just shit that you were told and you believed it. A lot of us don't even think about the stuff that we believe. And when it comes to money and finance and all of that stuff, a lot of our thoughts and our patterns and programs get in the way of us actually making money or going and doing shit that we want to do because we have limiting beliefs around it. So I really wanted to touch on the environment, how important that is, and really acknowledging like there's good and bad both
Of course.
grow up in.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. Like I look at all the times, like I'd mentioned, my dad would drag us out to the lake and we wouldn't see him. And we never, you mentioned it was 15. You were 15 to went on an actual holiday. Well, my dad, I think, had the scarcity mindset. He was born back in the Depression and he was one of 18 kids. My mom was one of 9. So he always was afraid to upset his clients more than he was afraid to upset us, because he was so driven by money, 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 because he was scared of not having it because of so many years of, living with 18 kids, living on a farm. They suffered, they struggled. So when he finally did having money, he's never changed that scarcity mindset. He still lives that way today. He's the type of guy, and you might chuckle at this, that'll go to an auction, buy a bucket of bent nails that have been pulled out of boards and straighten them. And he literally has built stuff over my lifetime with used lumber that he's bought and nails. And people will say, well, Ray, you're wealthy. What are you doing? Like, not everybody knows, but some of his friends do, because he does not look wealthy. Or he's had people offer him money. I remember people coming in and, oh, Ray, things must be tough at your business. Do you need a hand? And my dad goes, oh, I appreciate that. We'll be okay, but really appreciate you. Thank you. Meanwhile, he's got multiple seven figures in investing, right? And he had that mindset, right?
His perspective. He has a perspective that you and I don't know and understand. We don't know what food ration, like, we don't know what the depression looked like. So, my grandpa's similar mindset. He wants the plants in the yard have to produce, and same thing. And it's just, they have a perspective from that era and time that we don't.
Yeah.
And hard times create strong men, though, and strong men create good.
You know what?
That cycle.
And I don't want people to think I'm criticizing him. I learned a lot, but the reason I brought that up is because what you said, though, he sacrificed family. And now, as he's still alive, he's in his 80s. My mom and him, they come to all the stuff because I have 5 kids. They came to their stuff when they were growing up. I live an hour away from my home community. I live in Edmonton, right? 1.4 million people. Go home to, now it's 17,000 people. It's an hour away, but he hangs out and comes to the grandkids' birthdays. He comes to the grandkids' events. So he's trying to make up for all that he lost, that he sacrificed, invested, however you want to look at it. So that's why I brought it up. It's not that I don't think he never did it intentionally. He was just, like you said, we get pattern ingrained, and we don't know what it was like him growing up through that, right? And just stuff like that. And it's also a thing that too that's interesting is the fact you started one place, you quit college, and the pattern of where you went. I went to school and went into computer engineering. I ended up quitting. Thought I was going to get into my own business, got mentored by somebody else, got into the alarm industry. Ended up, that owner of that company convinced me to go into electronics engineering. I ended up working in that field after I graduated for a year, because I knew the seeds in me needed to be watered. I wanted to be my own entrepreneur and not be controlled by other people, and seeing all this money that I could make instead of getting paid peanuts, just enough to stay in a job where I knew they were making all this excess money, and started my own computer firm back there. I had a computer consulting firm for like close to a decade. So I understand that the patterns and the drive of what drives you and what drives me. Again, though, we may have an age difference, but we have a lot of commonality and similarities, right? So one of the things I wanted to talk about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a common thing that you mentioned there that I think is just that I'd like to point out is you can never get where you are without leaving where you're at. And you have to, there's that uncomfortable space, that hallway space in the middle, and I think that's what keeps a lot of people stuck with where they are, because of the fear of the unknown. But like, you're never ever going to be able to get where you want to be without leaving where you are. And you can't hold on to both at the same time. There has to be that
100%.
in yourself.
Well, it's all money driven though, right? Because people will look at the fact, if I leave my job, like we have a guy in one of Tony's masterminds. I've been coaching him off and on for the last couple of years on the finance side, because Tony's recommended it. I help him, and he needs to move on from where his current circumstance. And as an entrepreneur, he'd make way more money. And I black and white have shown him that, but he can't get past that fear of failure. And I always tell people, fear is an acronym that does not, everybody says it's false evidence appearing real. For me, fear is face everything and rise, right? You should just go out. People listening, Michael's done it. I've done it. So many people we know have done it and continue to do it. I'm going to drive till the day I die, take my last breath. When things make me scared, I know I need to do it. I need to run at it like and break through that brick wall, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. It's the fear, but it's also the sense of security, leaving that sense of security.
Of course, 100%. So one of the things like I mentioned earlier, when I heard you speak at the event, you spoke the fact there's only two types of people, those who do and those who don't, and watch from the sideline. I understand their fear can be driven by their associations and what they hear in the media from broke family, friends, or even worse, those who've tried and failed due to lack of knowledge or steps and processes involved to be successful. So they puke out that, oh, and they make people even more fearful and have that scarcity mindset. What have you found as a reason most people today hesitate to get into real estate investing themselves or any entrepreneurial venture for that matter?
Just a limiting belief that they can actually do it.
And it's back to that pattern behavior we talked about, learn from their parents and friends and family.
Yeah, I think it's a limiting belief. Like really, the source of it and the foundation is lack of confidence that they can actually do it. But then they'll disguise it with like, oh, I don't have money to invest in real estate, or I don't. So then on the surface level, you start hearing all the excuses and all of the reasons why they can't do it. But really what they're saying is, I don't believe in myself that I can do it.
So what made you, like, one of the things you mentioned is that you got your first book and you were doing self-help. That helped you with your confidence, correct? What made you decide
100%.
to pick? I can't remember what you said. You may have mentioned it. I apologize for not catching it. What made you decide to go down that path of picking up that first book?
It
Did you
was
know that
gifted. It was
it was?
gifted to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was gifted to me. And this guy, Ken, he had one for himself and he bought a copy for me. So there was a little bit of obligation there. Like I felt like I needed to read it because he gifted it to me and he was also reading it. But then also, like I had this thing, kind of the silent pressure of 2 million on my cubicle, and everyone else saw that in the office. And I'm the young guy who's only there because of his last name and doesn't have any fucking education. And basically I was given a job because I was a Burns essentially. And if we're being real, that was the truth. So like, there was already, I'm this young dude who's super underqualified in everyone else's minds. And then now I have this $2 million thing on my cubicle. So like, there was this silent pressure of like, I need to prove myself essentially. So I started reading the book and like, I was liking the stuff I was reading, and then I would apply it and then I would see results from it. Then you build momentum and then you're like, oh, this shit works. And then you just keep building momentum. And then you keep, like I was saying, everything's building blocks, right?
Yeah, of course.
And then as you continue to do that and you're keeping promises that you make to yourself and you're seeing results, well, then that's going to naturally grow your confidence.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the questions I put down here to like a bullet point was what person or event that drove you, and you just brought it up. A buddy gave you a book and you felt like you
Yeah.
needed to read it. That's amazing though. I've had stuff like that. I had a mentor, he's been a mentor of mine now since approximately 1989, 1988. And he drove me to do many different things over my lifetime when I was struggling. He gave me a book. I remember some of the first three books that he gifted to me. This would have been back in the early 90s, were Magic of Thinking Big, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Oh, and he gave me a fourth book, actually, The 5 Love Languages. He said, you need to read all these. And I felt extreme pressure, and I wasn't a reader, right? I wasn't a big fan of it, but I felt an obligation that I had to do it because this guy who is a multimillionaire who I was working for said, here, take all these books, right? I was doing some work for him at the time, plus have my own business. But you're so right though. Sometimes and I've done that now myself. I'll buy extra books of stuff over the last 30 years and I'll give them to people and say, here, you need to read it. I don't know if they feel the same obligation to read it or if they have. Some of them have, but that's amazing how you got into that, self-development space.
It's that old saying, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And I think God in the universe is constantly serving up opportunities for us. And it's just whether our level of awareness is there enough to realize an opportunity is in front of us. But then there's also the saying yes to it and going with it,
Yeah, being willing, like we talked about in regards to, it's not what you know and who you know. It's not what you know, it's who you know that counts. Like Tony said, but you got to be willing. So we talked a little bit about this, but why, in a nutshell, why is self-development and coaching so important on the road and the journey to having what one desires? Like, so that the listeners understand how key it has been for you and for myself.
Well, so what I was saying earlier is you start to see the momentum, and when you start seeing results in something that you're doing and something that you're intentional with, and then you start to see results, then you gain confidence, but then also you're going to double down and be more committed to it because so you start building momentum. Um, but for me, like, you can see there's a direct correlation. Like, the more time and money I invest in myself, the more money that I make. Like, if you were to look at a graph, like, the numbers would be going like this together. So for me, it's undeniable. Like, I see there's evidence of it everywhere. Like, I'm a better human, I'm better in business, I communicate better, I'm a better leader, I have better relationships, I make way more money. So, like, everything in my life, the more that I invest in me, just gets better. And as you continue to do that, like, the momentum and the confidence is and the results is undeniable. So that's what it's been for me. And it started with books, and then another book, and then when I got into real estate, I joined, the Salt Lake Real Estate Investors Association and started going to those. And then I started going to seminars out of state, and then listening to guys like Grant Cardone and Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. And then there's another piece too, is as you're growing, new information is going to be a new level of investment. So the newer information that you need, like the better information that you need, and the bigger, a more exclusive environment that you put yourself into, that's going to require more of an investment on your end. So I remember when I joined Arte Syndicate, when it used to be 100 people, super exclusive, you had to send in an application. That's with Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. It was a $6,000 a month or a $65,000 one-time payment commitment. And that scared the shit out of me. And I did it. So I ended up doing that. And that was like a major pivotal shift in my life, because the second that I swiped the card and I invested that money in myself, and got clear on why am I doing this? And it was for the information and the relationships and to take me to the next level. And that's exactly what happened. So there's, the energy piece of it and the law of attraction piece of it too. The more that you invest in yourself and the more intentional you are, you're gonna get that return back, because that's just energetically a law. For me, that's what I believe anyways. So the more that I invest in myself, and it doesn't have to be money either. I can talk about these expensive masterminds, but like I said, it started with a free book, and then a $10 book, and then a $20 book, and these building blocks that I'm talking about. So the results are just there. They're in denial. Like, you can't. They're 2 + 2 is 4. Like, it's just as true for me.
No, yeah, exactly. But I like how you put it, is building blocks. We start somewhere, just like the gentleman that gave me the initial books, and I went from there, and I was willing, and I just kept on elevating myself. Left that, sold that, got rid of that business, went on to the next business, and I just keep on. But one of the things that's always been key throughout all of it is self-development, and me being part of masterminds, me going to events, joining Arte, going from Arte into the 365 Driven Society, and belonging to. I literally have masterminds for speaking and author stuff that I belong to, and I have stuff that I belong to for the entrepreneur side. It's because I believe everybody has their value. I don't think there is any one surefire guru to help everything else. And you speak to Arte, look at how the yin and yang of Andy and Ed are with one another, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it works. That's why, so many things, whenever anybody ever tells me they're the Swiss Army knife of mentoring and coaching, I run the other way. Or it just doesn't exist, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, you gotta, really, bottom line, think about it this way. Like, if you want to start doing something, like, I wanted to start investing in real estate. So, okay, I was exposed a little bit about it growing up with my dad, but if I want to invest in real estate and I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, well, then I should go plug into an environment where real estate investing is happening where I live. So I joined the Salt Lake Real Estate Investors Association. $100 for the year. They have one meeting a month, a couple lunches throughout the month, small investment, but I'm putting myself in an environment where what I want to be doing is actually happening. So then I put myself in that environment, and then I see people around me doing what I want to do. And now it's like, fuck, this is real. Like this guy who's just like me is flipping a couple homes right now. He's no different than I am. I can do this. So when you put yourself in an environment where what you want to do is happening, and then you see it happening, it makes it more real for you. And then you're that much closer to your goal and your target.
Oh,
And you just doing that and doing that and doing that and doing
always
that.
the building blocks. Always the building
Yeah.
blocks. It's just like, I remember it was that one, I think it was the first RT event. They talked about, you know, what does a house need in order for it to be built? It needs a good foundation, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, from the foundation, you build and build and build. And part of the foundation for yourself and me was those first books, right?
Yeah.
And being willing to be open-minded and just continuing to climb and investing. Like I can remember, I went to this event and, you know, it was X amount of money and I was raising my kids, and as a single dad, I had no money and I was terrified. But that event catapulted me into where I am today in my 20th year now as a financial, financial planner, somebody that, and lifestyle coaching. But if I wouldn't have taken that risk and I wouldn't have stepped out on faith, because like they say, it may be corny, but our success is always outside of our comfort zone. Most of us are just so caught up in comfort or scarcity or fear or whatever that we don't try. But, you know, that's why it's always, the numbers haven't changed since I was, you know, in my 20s to my 50s now. There's only a couple percent that ever succeed, like Napoleon Hill. I just finished listening to Outwitting the Devil. Awesome, fantastic book. And you know, at the end of it, they talk about the fact that Napoleon Hill said back in the 30s, only 2 out of 100 people are ever successful, right? Truly are able to move forward and pivot. I won't get into all the details. I'd recommend people listen to the book or buy and read it. And those numbers haven't changed today. They're still the same. Why is that? Well, people just aren't willing to invest in themselves. Maybe their pattern behavior has taught them to be scared about everything, or negative. They're always in a negative mindset. They just don't know how to drive past it. Right.
Well,
So,
and even if someone who hasn't been working on themselves and all of that stuff, you know, let's say they love the idea of making $1 million a year. If you were to take someone that hasn't built that foundation you're talking about, and you put them in an environment where here's $1 million a year, they're going to fuck it up because they're not going to know what to do. They don't have the foundational support and to be the person that could even handle or comprehend like that reality happening for them. So it'd fucking crumble anyways. They'd blow all the money. They wouldn't know what to do with it. So it's not about the end thing or the money or the goal. It's about who do you have to become to be capable of producing whatever it is you think you want. Like that's what it is. And piece. It's like, who do I have to become to be capable of producing $1 million a year? And if you do that and you're producing the $1 million a year, you're going to know what to do with the money. You're going to be a good steward of finances and all of the stuff. You're not going to go buy a Ferrari and a house and realize, oh fuck, I still owe taxes. You know what I mean? Like you have to have the foundation.
Most people don't have it. That's why people that get large, and it's really becoming prevalent as the baby boomers start to, you know, the baby boomers' parents, the last of the living generation of the centurions are passing away. And the baby boomers, the first wave has already been passing away, and they're passing money down, large sums of money, or somebody that wins an inheritance. Like you said, they don't have a good foundation, the building blocks to understand, and they go out and blow it all. And most of them are worse off after the fact. Right. It's a sad situation, but it's a harsh reality. And our school system is broken. It does not, again, I'm not here to cut down educators or, you know, the people that are teaching. It's the government that puts together these programs that educate our youth. They don't teach them the right things. They don't teach them about how to work on their 6 inches between their ears. They don't teach them how to be money conscious or understand the principles of the building blocks where they should start right in school. And then they come out of it.
It's designed.
Pardon?
So I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think we have a delay. I said it's designed to support the system, but that's all. That's all.
It's a giant it's a giant babysitting service. If I'm being real with you, and you've seen that through the pandemic, how people were panicking when the schools and daycare, or pardon me, the daycares in Canada were closed. I don't know about the US. people were panicking, begging their family to watch their kids so they could still go make a living. And it just proved to me even more what I've been saying for 20 some years, that the school system's a giant babysitting service. So that does it teach some things? Yes, it does, but it teaches a lot of useless things. I don't know when the last time that I needed to understand how to calculate the circumference of a circle. Like, anyway, that's just a stupid example, but you know what I'm saying. So, bottom line, there's things that need to change, and we need to be the catalyst for it. Hopefully enough people hear my podcast, hear your podcast, connect with us, have that relationship, so that they start leveling up and we start really affecting the people, other so-called leaders that are supposed to make the right decisions for the society that we live in, right? So we haven't really touched on this. I'd like to touch a little bit about your real estate, right? Dive into this area and give some listeners some knowledge. Obviously, we won't go into it too in depth. They can reach out to you and find out information, and hire you as a coach so that they can get going where they need to go, because it's not much different in Canada as it is to the US. We're pretty much, family, our two countries. So can you do me a favor and please break down the different types of real estate investors there are for the listeners, and how one can figure out what their wheelhouse is when it comes to investing in real estate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think first and foremost, when you're looking at investing in real estate, or really anything in general, is you got to decide, am I an active investor or a passive investor? An active investor, meaning an operator. Like, am I going to be rolling my sleeves up, finding the deal, dealing, if you're flipping houses, dealing with the contractors and the real estate agents and doing all the stuff, or managing the property and dealing with tenants, dealing with the development piece, whatever it is. Like, so if you're an active investor, you're an operator, you're like hands on deck doing it. And then you can also invest in real estate passively, where that's also known as a limited partner or an LP. The other side would be a GP, a general partner, if you're looking at, like people investing together. So you need to decide, like, do I want to be active in it, or do I just want to put my money with an investor that I trust, that has a history and a track record? They know what they're doing. My money is secured in the deal against the property, and I'm just going to get a return on the property, whether that's an equity piece, or you say, I'm going to get a 10% return annualized on my money for however long it's in the deal. I think that's really step one, is identifying what type of investor are you? Because if you have a successful business like you, Dwight, like you're finance guy, all that stuff, you should spend your time focused on doing what you do and making money, and then sending your money off to boot camp and letting it come back and grow up a little bit, right?
So passive.
So yeah, passive. So it just depends on, you need to identify that first, because if you're more passive and you're more built for passive, but you're out there trying to, manage a flip and deal with contractors and all this stuff, and that might be way too much for you. And then you're in a high risk situation. So identifying that would be first and foremost. And then also, you want to know what's your investment criteria, what's your risk level tolerance? Like, do you want partners? Do you not want partners? Do you want to be flipping stuff, or do you want to be more buy and hold? So I think really, what kind of target returns do you need? Because real estate's great and you could get great returns, but what are the options if you put your money in the markets or bonds, or if you other investment opportunities? So what type of investor are you? And then what's your investment criteria? What's your box? Because if you don't have any rules and guidelines, and you're just out there willing to do any investment opportunity, you're not being very disciplined as an investor, because you need to know, like, what is it I'm investing in? What's my target return? And like you teach your clients, you need to have a plan that you're following and executing on your plan, right?
Absolutely.
So those things are super important. And then in real estate, you kind of have residential, which is, where people live. And then you've got commercial, which is office space, medical space, storage, warehouse, apartments, or do you want to be dealing with homes, single family homes, duplex, triplex, stuff like that. So, you know, and different deals are going to have different structures, you know. So if you're doing larger commercial deals, it's likely that you're not doing that by yourself. Usually you have groups or teams or partners doing those deals. And then if you want to be more on the active side, you know, are you good at finding deals, or are you better at managing contractors? Maybe you're a numbers person and you just want to do the underwriting portion of stuff. So really finding what you like and what you're good at and focusing in on that, and then working with other people who are, you know, can fill in the gaps of the things that you're not good with. So there's a lot of different ways you can structure it. So, you know,
A mentor is important.
I,
A mentor is important,
yeah,
was what I'm getting.
100, yeah, 100%. Or like being with people who know what they're doing, or, you know, spending the time and effort to learn what you're doing. So passive or active, what kind of returns do I need? Do I want to be in commercial or residential? Do I want partners, or do I want to do this on my own? Those are all things that I think are really important to consider up front before you're actually going to put your hard and earned money into an investment opportunity. Because the last thing you want to do is have your first, you know, couple opportunities not be smooth and successful. Because if you invest in real estate and it ends up, you know, you got a shitty partner and you realize, hey, partner's not for me. You also realize I don't want to be an active operator. I hate contractors and city inspectors. And then you get in this situation, it's a poor experience. Maybe you end up losing money where you're never ever going to invest in real estate again because you had a bad experience early on. Or, you know, early on, like me, I made 24,000 on that first flip. It was awesome. I had a great experience, and I'm like, I'm going all in on this thing. So I think it's really important to set yourself up for success and do your due diligence, and really just make sure you're putting yourself in a good environment that's within your risk tolerance. And then, you know, you got, at the end of the day, you got to jump in and do it.
Yeah, well, I like how you put it. You got to do your due diligence, because I also put here, you know, when somebody gets initially started, what is the least volatile area for them to get started and when they're doing real estate investing? Well, you're with everything that you just shared, they got to do their due diligence. They got to figure out exactly what area they want to get into, and then decide if they're willing to understand that you could go from 24K, like you said, to losing 50K. Do they have the, you know, got the steel balls to hold on and make sure that they can make it through? So the biggest thing though is, you know, I find that most people are, oh, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start next month, I'll start next year once I get all my ducks in a row. Sometimes getting your ducks in a row is the worst possible thing. Listeners, I'll tell you that from experience. I'd rather have knowledge on, you know, I'd rather have knowledge, pardon me, I'd rather have ignorance on fire than knowledge on ice. And that's the biggest problem that we see in today's society. Everybody wants to have everything perfect. I'd rather be ignorantly blissful and going out and doing it and learning along the way, realizing I might skin my knees, and then pick myself up and find somebody else that can help me course correct if I'm not quite getting it. Or like you said, working with other people that have that knowledge, and and you're thirsty, you're like a sponge soaking it up. And, you know, nothing drives me more crazy than when somebody asks for my advice. I'll get on a call and I'm giving them advice for free, knowledge that I would charge for. And I'll give them all this information and they're not taking notes, whether it's face-to-face or on a Zoom call. They're just asking me. They haven't put any thought process into what we're going to communicate about. And I look at their lives 30, 60, 90 a year later, and they're in the same place, and they're bitching and whining when, you know, as a spiritual person, you and I are, sometimes people are brought to you to help you out in your life. You need to have your eyes open and realize that they're there to help you. And so listen, take it serious. And people just don't do that.
And that's a big difference of actually having a value exchange and paying money. You know, like when you pay money for something, you're versus it being free, you're going to value it because there's an exchange there, right? You're giving up something you worked hard for. You're giving up something that's yours, you have an attachment to. So then, you know, when we pay for something, we want to see a value exchange. And I think that's why free stuff, you get way more out of. You could have something that's free and something that's exactly the same that someone paid $500 for, and every single person is going to get more out of the $500 because 100%. They paid for it, they invested in it. So it's not free. So now there's a value on it and there's an exchange on it. So it's like, oh, I paid for it, I want to get something for it, versus if it's free, you just don't care because you're not invested.
100%. Just like you spending that $6,000 after you swipe the card.
Yeah.
right? You were willing to step out on faith, get out of your comfort zone, and really, like they say, put your money where your mouth is. And I think about all the money I've invested just in the last 2 years, personal development, building my Give a Heck brand and everything. I've invested easily. I've invested 6 figures in the last 24 months. And people will go, well, that's expensive. You've spent a lot of money. No, I've invested a lot of money because I believe in me and I'm not done, right? The music's not going to die in me. I've got a lot more things I need to share and help people with. And in order for me to do that, I got to continue to invest in myself so I can be somebody that, can have a bigger group of people know, like, and trust me, right? To know that I am the real deal. And so, yeah, you got to invest in yourself. Kudos to you, man. Like, unbelievable. You're a young guy and look what you've accomplished and you're still accomplishing. People, we'll talk about it at the end here, but you need to reach out to Michael, especially if you're interested in getting into the real estate game. Hire him to help you. It'll collapse time frames. Every time I've invested money, even when I've been scared, it's like you said, though, it collapses time frames. All of a sudden now you've invested this money and it's the trajectory that you go up is always quicker. Initially, like, I'm looking at developing a course program here. Well, it's going to be like 18, 20K. And I've had people tell me, well, why are you doing that? Do it yourself. Why am I doing it? Because they're an expert at it. Let them figure it out. I'll spend 20 and 5 times my output instead of trying to do it myself.
Well, and what's crazy is people don't think anything about going and dropping 40, 50, 60, 100 grand on a college education for a piece of paper, but spending $2,500 on a self-development weekend seminar that could actually like teach you the shit to make you rich, not to teach you to be an employee like school does. And people think nothing of that. Student loans, like we do mortgages, in one of our businesses. So like we're looking at credit all the time. And it's fascinating to me how many people have just shitloads of student debt. And in Canada, I know you get a little more free school. I don't know, with all that social shit that you do.
No, we don't get free school here. I wish. We don't get free college, university. It's expensive.
Okay. Well, so anyways, like, yeah, you'll think like, so where I'm looking at mortgage applications all the time, and it's like someone's got $80,000 in student loans and they're not even working in the field that they have all the student loans in. So it's like you went and spent 80 grand. Now you're a slave to this debt. It's affecting how much of a home you can buy. And this 80,000 is going to follow you your whole life. And you're not even working in the field that you spent 4 years, 5 years and 80 grand to do. But that same person, you say, hey, go to this $2,500, weekend workshop or this coaching or learn how to go do sales or whatever. And it's like, oh no, can't do that. That's a scam. That's a ripoff. And it's like coming from the person that has 80 grand and a piece of paper they don't fucking use. You're going to say this is a scam. So it's all about perspective and mindset.
100%. 100%. Well, it's statistically, like university colleges here, it's upwards close to 70% of people that graduate with a diploma or a degree actually work in that field, and they got huge student loans. Like my daughter graduated in 2020. She's a nurse. She's a registered nurse, and 70 some thousand in student loans, right? Like it wasn't cheap. And that was on top of all the money I helped her out with, the things that I paid for. She still took out student loans to compensate. She didn't live here. She lives in Calgary, where Calgary is. And she went to Mount Royal University to become one of the top colleges, universities in the country, but still come out of school with 70 some thousand to make 70,000. Do you know what I mean? Like, could you imagine if she had done other things? I'm not saying that I'm not proud of her, because I am. She's an amazing nurse. She's a travel nurse now. She worked for a while in Calgary. She was working in a COVID unit, and now she's out travel nursing and making big bucks, right? Because there's such a shortage of nurses both in the US and Canada. She's actually been offered to go down to the US. They offered her, I think it was last year, she got offered by a company to go down there for a year. But regardless of that, coming out of school, like you said, large debts and not even working in the field, that's been the same for as long as I can remember, which is sad, really. But again, most people don't even know what to go to school for. The one that makes me the saddest are the people that, and sorry if those listening, if you're one of these people, but they go get an art degree. Okay.
Yeah.
Now what?
For the same, yeah, because you're trained to think grow up, go to school, get a good job, and then you're guaranteed the white picket fence and all the happy shit. And
Yeah.
that's just not
It's not the reality. That's the way I grew up. We have a wife, kids, white picket fence, 2.1 kids, 2 kids and a dog, basically. And but bottom line though, it is what it is, man. So one of the things I wanted to two more things, and then we're going to wrap this up. I imagine initially money was a big motivator for you. And you've touched on this a little bit, and you've accomplished so much up to this point. What is your motivation today that keeps you hungry and continue to drive you moving forward, brother?
So I'm gonna give you a long answer to that. My
Sure.
motivation today is fulfilling my purpose and really sharing everything that I'm learning along the way and developing this lifestyle brand message that I have. But we think the money, because money for the most people, money is like the big thing, especially if you're, entrepreneur driven. Like we want money, we want to make money, because it's not about the money. It's about like, the options. Like, what's the money going to do for us? I can buy cool shit. I'm going to have, like for your dad, having money was important because he grew up in the Great Depression. So it's a sense of security, right? For others of us, money is about nothing more than a sense of self-significance. So whether it's the money, the fancy car, the big fucking house, the vacations, the watches, all that stuff, we're chasing these things because it's not about the thing. It's about how we think we're going to feel when we have that thing. And Ed Milet talks about this all the time. So for me, it was all about money, money, money. And then I made 200 grand in a month. My wife hadn't been home in 2 weeks, staring divorce in the face. And I didn't give a fuck about the money. I cared this much about the money because everything else in my life was not going well. And the money didn't matter. It did nothing for me. Cool. I have money in an account, but I'm fucking miserable and I'm not happy and I'm in a shitty situation. So that was when it clicked for me, like, oh, it's about way more than money. And that's when I really started diving into the spiritual stuff. And what I've found is the more that you work on the inside and the more that you take care of yourself and do self-development for real, because for the longest time, I thought self-development was reading books and learning how to do sales and leadership. And it was always business driven, but there was always that missing link. So when I started doing true self-development and the spiritual work, it's amazing. Everything else around me started getting better. Like I have the big fancy house, I drive the Ferrari, I wear a Rolex, I make the money. All of this stuff just starts taking care of itself. Amazing relationships, all of that. So that's my long answer for it. It's not about the money. It's about how we think the money or the thing is going to make us feel. And if we're attaching our sense of whatever to these external things, you're always going to end up empty with yourself.
Oh, that's an awesome answer. And the next thing I wanted to talk about, and you brought it up, was the spiritual aspect. You had put that down in on the sheet saying that you wanted to talk about spiritual. What exactly do you mean about spirituality and how it's affected your life? Like what has it done for you, brother?
Yeah, it's like changed everything, man. The more that I go down, the last 3 years, I've been going heavy down the spiritual path, doing plant medicine ceremonies, getting a life coach, meditating. I never even would mention God. 6 months ago, you wouldn't hear me talk about God, and now I talk about it regularly. And it's not a religious thing. Like I've never had any religious influence my whole life. I've never been to church with my parents unless someone died. So when I say spiritual, it's not a fucking book and some crazy ass rules and a guy in the sky. That's not what I'm referring to. Like for me, spiritual is the journey of becoming the best version of yourself and realizing that God and the universe are here supporting you along the way to the extent that you're going to be, putting in the effort as well. So for me, as I work on me and I work on undoing all these patterns and thoughts and the programming, like we talked about earlier, and I'm letting go of the limiting beliefs and I'm realizing, oh, everything doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be sacrificed. That's my dad's programming and that's his shit, not mine. Like people aren't honest, like all these different thoughts and all of these things that are running in the background all the time. My programming, most of that shit was not my original idea. And I never fucking agreed to any of it. I just said, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I believe. And I didn't even know why I believed it. So as I started unraveling all of that and just finding out who is Michael and what's important to Michael and getting in tune with my core values. So my entire life is based and run on my core values. Everything is core values. Your core values are your guiding principles. And then you have, you know, your goals or your purpose and your central concepts of what you want your life to look like. So that's where this lifestyle brand is for me. So that's what spiritual is for me. And then, you know, when I'm doing my meditating and now, you know, I speak with God daily and I see signs from the universe all the time, like the number 3 and 9 are my numbers. I see them all the time. People pop into my life, things come up into my life. And I know it's because the more that I'm true to my purpose and I stay in alignment with my core values, because those are my guiding principles, and I'm working on me, like all the other shit takes care of itself. I make more fucking money today than I ever have. I have stronger, better relationships than I ever have. I'm in the best physical shape that I've ever been in. Like everything is great. And I'm in the midst of a divorce right now. And as I've grown and that gap became so large between, you know, I guess my soon to be ex-wife and me, like, you know, like things that were going different ways. But I know in my heart of hearts, like the more that I'm loyal to the truth and the more that I'm true to myself and my purpose and my core values, and I'm intentional with the life that I'm creating, like everything's just unfolding. And here we are.
That's awesome, brother. I like how well, because most religions are man-made, let's be real. And they're all about control and structure. And just like political parties are too, same sort of crap. Everybody's trying to control everybody. But once you figure out who you want to be, like you mentioned, and you stay true to yourself and you have your core values, which of course I understand. I live by simple. I have detailed ones similar to what we learned in Arte, but my simple core values are faith, family, work, right? And the more I follow those, and I realize work's important because money is a tool to get me what I need. But if I don't have my faith or my family, which doesn't mean that you're a church going person. I just have faith that there's, and so many, I have faith in people. I have faith in myself. Most importantly, I have to have faith in myself that I'm going to do the right things and support and serve people. So I love your response. That's great, right? And you couldn't talk about God 6 months ago. There's people that can't talk about God that even go to church. So
you have faith in being a person is a right thing to do, right? Are you with me?
Yeah, you just locked up again. The last thing I heard was the word faith.
Am I here?
Yeah, start over.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's come back.
So you have faith in that being a good person is the right thing to do. So if you're operating your life from like, I have the faith that me being a good person, whatever that looks like throughout the day, every opportunity that I have to be loyal to being a good person is the right thing to do. Like that's spirituality right there within itself for me.
Absolutely. So like I said, dude, we were so much on the same plane. And another thing that I want to add too, though, because I've mentioned a couple of times, we may have an age difference, but that means nothing. I've learned stuff from you. I can learn stuff from people that are older than me, younger than me, because I'm open-minded. I have faith that people are going to always be their genuine self. And then it's just a matter of finding the groups and associations to find those genuine people, which Arte 365 has done. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be talking. So the universe is ensuring, or God, however, you know, people are agnostic, atheists, I don't care what you are. There's a reason people come into your life. Sometimes they're not meant to be there for the whole season of your life, but when they are, be present with that person and learn what you can. Decimate, or pretty much cut up what good that you can, leave the garbage. And sometimes that person will continue on, or you're just going to pedal on in your bike and keep on going and moving forward to the next person that's going to help you elevate, or maybe you're going to help them elevate. But, you know, don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in your life. There's so much more that we can give. But just make sure you have some core values. If you're not sure what that exactly is, you can Google it, or you can reach out to one of us and we can talk to you a little bit about it too, because it's important to have core values.
Well, and as you raise your level of awareness, you're going to recognize opportunities, because I think opportunities and things are there in front of us all the time. It's just a matter of us plugging into it and realizing it. Like, being positive and coming from a place of love and all of that stuff, that's always there existing. It's just up to us to plug into that energy and that frequency. And the more that you raise your level of awareness, the more that you're going to see, oh, maybe this person came into my life for a reason. Maybe that book is sticking out to me off of a shelf for a reason. There's a message in me there for me. So the more that you're aware of what's going on around you and what's coming into your space and what, is popping out to you, the more that you're going to be able to see those things. And then, like you said earlier, it's taking action or saying yes to it and then leaning into that. And for me, the more that I do that, the more that I build momentum, the more that my level of awareness raises, and then more opportunities and things just continue to flow my way.
Well, yeah, because you're attracting people, you're attracting opportunity.
Yeah, but also as you're raising your level of awareness as well, the things and people who are in your life currently, they're also, from an energetic standpoint, going to see that that's going on. So you're going to notice that some people just fall off on their own. Other things just kind of go off on their own because you're continuing to do your thing and attracting what's coming in. And the stuff that doesn't vibe with you is not going to be there.
And so that's a good thing. Right. And I used to think to myself, oh, I've had this person in my life this long and we've had this connection and this and this and that. And it used to be an anchor in my mindset. Now it's just, what? They're going on their way and I'm going on mine. And like you said, you're elevating and you're attracting other things that they're not necessarily part of that. And it's okay to move on and not have people around you. Like I had friends for 20 some years when I started becoming an entrepreneur that were negative, or they weren't necessarily supportive, or, oh, come on, leave that for later. Let's go for a beer. Let's go play some golf. Let's go do this and that. And it was just like, no, I got a plan. I got to put this time in.
Well, what that does is, as they're seeing you do that, it shines a light on them and their bullshit and what they know they're not doing. And it's a lot easier to just be like, oh, Dwight's changing. He thinks he's fucking better than so-and-so. And like, I have a kid that I'm coaching right now, just received a super shitty text from his brother the other day. And he sent me the text and I was like, dude, congratulations. That's awesome. Like, this is part of the process. Like, you're changing, you're growing, and it's making him feel uncomfortable because he knows he's not doing that. Right. So that's part of the deal. And you hear the whole crab mentality, if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, one crab is almost out of the bucket. The other crabs are actually going to reach up and grab him and pull him back down because they don't want to see him do that. So it's like, people want to see you do good, as long as it's not better than them. And then when you start doing better than them, that's when you find out who your real friends are and who your real support system is. There's just
100%. 100%, brother. 100%. This has been an amazing conversation, but one last thing, and then we're going to close her up. Michael, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Plan B is reinforcing plan A. You either want it or you don't. So in my podcast, the intro is, you can build a lifestyle or you can live a bullshit life, but you can't do both.
Awesome. That's awesome. And congrats on your podcast, by the way. That's amazing. What was the name of it again, so listeners can look it up?
Freedom Lifestyle Experience.
I'll make sure that that's in the show notes. You'll be able to access that at giveaheck.com. Hit the podcast portal button. You'll go in and you'll see Michael and be able to find out how to connect up with him and check out his podcast as well. So what's the best way for people to reach you, though, so I can make sure that goes in the show notes?
Yeah. On Instagram at michael.burns with a Z, BURNZ. Really active on Facebook every day. I really try to post a lot of valuable content. And then Facebook, Mr. Michael Burns. And then the podcast, if you want to check that out.
Awesome. I appreciate you being on, brother. This has been an awesome conversation. We could probably talk the rest of the day and add value to the listeners, people watch, and even to each other. Because what people don't realize, and you probably do now that you're into podcasting, I get more out of the podcast than anybody listening to it, because I'm a note taker, I'm a planner. And after this is done, we're done here, I will review this before it even goes to the production company. I review my notes, and I learned so much. I invested my time and you graciously give me some of your time, and I take that seriously. So I really appreciate you, brother. God bless you for your time and energy today. And I know it's going to change people's lives when they listen to this.
Yeah, well, no, equally, the opportunity was all mine, and I'm thankful and grateful for you to have me on. And hopefully, I said some stuff that made a difference and provides some value. But thank you for the opportunity to have me on.
Oh, dude, you're electric, man. You're a great storyteller. You're got good energy, and people listening, that is imperative when you're trying to lead and support others. You need to get those traits down. You need to be able to be vulnerable, be a good storyteller, and be somebody that's congruent in your thought processes. And Michael, you have all of that, brother. I really appreciate it. Right.
Thank you so much.
So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Michael. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.